It's just horrible. So we're on Shemini, which is Leviticus, Vayikra 9, page 630 in the Eitz Chaim. Beginning of chapter 9 of Vayikra. Of Leviticus.
In Portuguese, Mr.
Shabbat Shalom.
Portuguese.
In Portuguese.
English. Portuguese, English version.
Okay, so we're continuing what seems like kind of an endless discussion on sacrifices and the various details. But we have in this week's portion, this incident with Nadav and Avihu. And I thought it would be worthwhile spending some time on that, like what exactly went wrong and what do we learn from the context, what went before and what went after? Because I think that incident, we'll see how the discussion goes. But I think that incident throws a lot of light on, what do I want to say, the anthropology or the technology of the altar and how it works. So I wanted to kind of focus attention on that. So we begin, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. B'divrei Torah.
I thought it was Hamoti Lach Min Haaretz.
Well, you started eating too soon. So does somebody want to start reading? So you don't always have to hear my voice? No.
I'll read after I chew.
Well, I was thinking in English, but if you want to do it in Portuguese. Oh, we don't need it in Farsi either.
Chant it in Farsi. No, nobody's
On
reading.
the eighth day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, take a calf of the herd for a purification offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before the Lord. And speak to the Israelites, saying, take a he-goat for a purification offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before the Lord, and a grain offering with oil mixed in. Today, the Lord will appear to you.
Okay, let's stop and just sort out what's going on. So what are the different sacrifices we have here? And why? Well, why beyond God said so?
It's
All right.
interesting that it's the day after, well, no, there is the eighth day of Pesach in the Bible. So it is still Pesach.
Well, this is, well, no, this is the 8th day after the 7 days of ordination. So they've gone through 7 days of ordination, or what do you call it, whatever, consecration. And then the next day, so the first real day, right? This is how you start the altar. Right, you get, right, get up in the morning, you go out, you turn the keys, you warm up the engine, right? So this is how you start the altar.
Before this, the first 7 days when Moshe was he doing these three offerings also the same way?
No,
He was only putting up and taking down,
at least yes, he was putting up and taking down, but
but he didn't do
the
the
whole
offerings
offering
at
thing
all.
is so, yeah.
Okay.
What I'm getting at here, just to be transparent, so part of my training was an anthropologist, and there's some anthropology here. How do you do sacrifices and how do they work? What's the mechanics? And I think that's what's being laid out here. Okay, we've got to, first of all, 4 things have to line up or things go bad. It has to be the right sacrifice in the right place, in the right time, by the right person.
In the right order.
Okay, fine, in the right order, right? Because the heavens are so dangerous. Think back at Sinai, right? So the children of Israel cannot go up to Sinai. Why? They're commoners. Only the priests, or actually it was Moses, but Moses and the priests can go up, but the people can't. And if they do, it's a problem. The altar is the same way. So keep thinking of the altar as a sort of Sinai, right? Certain people, priests, can go at certain times with certain offerings and can go up to the altar. Anybody who doesn't do that gets zapped. So there's a sort of Sinai.
You just went from the beginning of this parsha to the end.
Right, right. But I mean, that's how these things work.
So there's like a holy space, a holy time, and a non-holy, and we go from one to the other, we gotta do it the right way.
Exactly. And if you do the right thing in at the wrong time, or the right thing in the wrong place, or the whatever, then it doesn't work. And it can have dire consequences, however you say that in Portuguese, right? So that's what's going on here. So,
But Rabbi, I'm sorry, the last sentence said, for today the Lord will appear to you. It doesn't say, if you do this way and that way, the Lord will appear to you. It's almost the Lord's gonna come and we gotta be prepared in a certain way. And that's a little bit different.
yes, and I think that's a good point. Because when the Lord appears, it's dangerous, right? Moses saw him face to face, but that was obviously exceptional. So the Lord's gonna come down, he's gonna appear, the altar's holy. Careful how you approach it, because the Lord will appear. And if you're in the wrong place, the wrong time, whatever, you're in danger. Right? Yeah,
That the first couple ones, they are having it be burnt, but the last like ox ram and the grain,
yeah,
they don't specify it needing to be burnt. And
okay. That's exactly where I was going. Thank you. Yes, right. No, that's the question. So what are the offerings here?
It is for Aaron, I think, like, Aaron, the calf, and the ram, but then for the Israelites. So I think when this, Aaron has to go first specifically with those, and when he's finished, then the Israelites have to go again.
Right. So the way it should work, first of all, the first, it says a purification offering, which isn't exactly what the Hebrew says. The
It's a
Hebrew says
chatat.
chatat. So a sin offering. So the first thing it has to do is Aaron has to purify himself, right? Because you don't want to lose Aaron the first day. And then you have to go through a whole search process. You've all been through, right?
Well, we just wait for the white smoke.
My wife and I had a talking over breakfast. Should I say anything about the demise of the Pope and all that? She said, no, it's not really relevant.
It's not relevant. Thank you.
Okay. So-
You're talking about the priest, because all his garments
Yes, yeah.
are based on what the priest did. When you-
Right.
He went in the back of the vestry. Right? Well, the cardinal wasn't there and we were just touring and somebody let us in. And we saw all the yarmulkes in different colors and different colors. He changed more than any of the rabbis changed. On the meeting.
Right. No, it's all based on this. It's all based on this, absolutely. Yeah. All right.
That's why it's relevant.
Oh, so it comes up anyway. So anyway, the first thing that has to happen, so we've got the priest ordained. Aaron is now a proper priest. Just to be sure, he has to purify himself. So that's the first thing, the purification. It's really the chatat, the sin offering. But okay. What's a burnt offering?
The Allah is completely burned on the altar.
All right, sometimes it's called a whole offering because, yeah, but the entire animal is burnt. Well, there are parts that are taken out and
Yeah.
so on, but everything else that's on the altar burns up into smoke. So it's a full burnt offering or a whole offering, okay? Later on, that's the one that's done every day. Actually, it's done twice every day, morning and afternoon. That's where you get
Well, that's the tummy.
sorry?
Bones.
They're later on cleaned off, the ashes are cleaned off. I mean, that's what us Levites do, but the animal itself is,
purify the altar. Is that also the reason why they be doing for
Yes.
purification?
so this is the beginning of,
Making it kosher.
yeah. Making the altar kosher, right? So you need a kosher priesthood doing the koshering the altar, and then the people bring sacrifices, right? That's the order. Okay. So that's a burnt offering. a calf and a lamb, yearling without blemish for a burnt offering. You don't want to offer anything blemished up to the Lord, right? Because if it's blemished, it means it's got a disease or an imperfection. And that doesn't go with the altar. The altar goes with purity, with life, with all of that. So if it's already got signs of distress, you can't bring it to the altar.
It's hard to find anything without a blemish. You know, I mean. I know.
Later on, when we listen to, when we read in the prophets, when they're criticizing the temple, right? And the priesthood, they say, oh, they're corrupt, they're bringing blemish stuff. So probably in theory, everything was perfect. In practice, you know. And how big does a blemish have to be before it's a blemish?
The simplest blemish is the animal was injured, broken leg or partially broken
Right,
leg.
blind and whatnot. I mean, there are obvious blemishes. But if it's got a discoloration, is that a blemish? That's right, and that's why we have a Talmud. But basically it should, and a young animal, vital, full of life, right?
It does.
And a male, by the way, because they're better.
Well, and you're supposed to be, well, also you need the females to make more animals. But,
Well, you need males for that too, but.
yeah, but you
that's
only
a different
need one male and lots of females in
Yeah.
theory.
Well,
But isn't the other thing that, I mean, it depends what you mean by blemish and something clearer than others, but the point is, don't offer something you wouldn't even want yourself. You want to offer something really good. It's a gift.
right, that part, yeah, this calf over here is useless, I hate it, I'll give it to God. No, you can't do.
In the first one, it just says to bring what does it say? A ram.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything about the age of the ram. In that second one, where the people are bringing it, has to be a yearling.
Yeah. So a ram, I think, has to be 3 years. Or
Doesn't
under,
say.
Maybe the word ram itself indicates.
which could be, it's like, you know, you bring a foal and a horse or something. Yeah, true. I'm an urban guy, I don't, yeah.
You're not a farmer?
I'm not a farmer. So you take,
That's not right.
Why does the priest get, Aaron get a calf, but the people take a he goat? Same offering.
different offering, just different offering with different function. And you start off with the ram, which is the burnt offering, which is the high one. That purifies the altar. The next thing is the, what's it called?
Actually, it's a calf and a ram.
Calf and a ram. And
And then
ram for
here
an
it-
offering of well-being. What's the offering of well-being? That's a good one. In Hebrew, it's shlamim,
Complete.
wholeness, complete wholeness. It's an English problem. Sometimes the burnt offering is called the whole offering because it all goes up. And sometimes the shlamim is called the whole offering because shalem, shalom.
But again, I'm in English, and it says they're both sin offerings.
Yeah, that's not true. The translator get it, right? So the sin offering is what is translated as purification offering. That's the chatat. Then you get an oleh, whole offering or fully burnt offering. Shlamim is when a person brings an offering and the person gets part of it back and to eat. Right, as food. So the priest gets some and the donor gets some. And we've just finished a very famous shlamim, the Pesach. You bring it to the altar, the priest sacrifices it, but you get some of it back, which you use in the Seder. Today we have the bone, right?
Shank.
The shank, but that's the shlamim. So that's a second order. So you have the altar, the priest, the people, right? That's the rank, right? And only certain of them bring certain sacrifices up to a certain point. Grain offerings?
That's the farm.
Why a grain offering?
Not everybody can afford.
First of all, not everybody can afford to bring a whole animal, right? And we know from the Noahide laws, you're not just allowed to chop off part of your living animal, bring this left leg or something, right? You can't do that. But I mean, grain is the other side of what we eat. As a matter of fact, most people probably at this time were vegetarian by, just the way it was, right? Except the priests who were eating meat 3 times a day. Right? I mean,
Twice a day, time.
well, at least twice a day. Yeah.
Without the grain offering, we wouldn't have minimum.
Right, right.
That is.
I know.
So and then it ends, for today the Lord will appear to you, which I take to mean you've got the altar in place, you've got this consecrated priesthood after the 7 days. The priests have now brought their sin offering. We've now brought the initial burnt offering. It's open up to the people with the shlamim. The Lord will appear. And I think that means the altar is now charged, right? And you touch it and you're gonna get a shock.
You're not gonna like what I'm gonna say, but in the Hebrew, the appear is near he comes near to you.
Well,
Near
Well, it's,
I said you wouldn't like it.
right. Who invited you again?
I don't know.
But I mean, I think it's got that somehow the Lord will appear, will be there. This is now, the altar is functioning. Okay? So, everybody with me so far? Does it all make sense? Okay, so somebody wanna go on?
I have a question. When you said, speak to the Israelites, okay, is that implied that each family has to do that?
Well, like a shlamim, like if you bring a Pesach offering, when you made the pilgrimage to the temple, every family brought its lamb. Now, you could get several families together and do it. You know, you
Right.
could do a kind of coalition. But yes,
There was enough time in the day, seems like it's.
how this actually worked in real time is, yeah, and
sure you had a big banquet with a lot of people.
yeah, I can't imagine how this would have worked. Later on, the Talmud says God always did a miracle and all these people came from all over the place and it was never crowded and there were no flies, right?
Yeah,
Sure. But yeah, I think it's, I mean,
I mean, who doesn't, well, you know, how could everybody do this?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
there were thousands of priests.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine like 10,000 families bringing shlamim and the priest getting a piece of meat from all of them? That they have to eat that day?
I still can.
Yeah, but I mean,
although there are rules that if it's held over by the 3rd day, you just dispose of it.
Right, so I mean,
It
yeah,
was big.
because otherwise the priests would just, they'd all die of cardiovascular something. By age 28, you know, yeah.
Well, after all, they're very close to the altar, so maybe you burn brightly very quickly. I don't know.
Right.
breathe that out.
I did.
About that.
About what?
Not really, no, they talks,
They can describe this, this is a story. I think only Jews would think of this.
Right.
And, you know, students, rabbinic students of all the denominations. But you never hear the Christians make a differentiation, say anything, you know, you bring it, that's all. And
Yeah, right.
well,
That's-
yeah, because to us, it seems oddly, it's supposed to, you know, it's about Parot, but it's remote to us. So there was a time, I'll just share this, I was studying Yoma with a group, and there's a big description of how the temple worked.
Right.
And somebody says after the class, so as not to embarrass anybody, you know, it must have smelled worse than most slaughterhouses in the United States, the way it's described. So many offerings, that's like a conveyor belt of offerings.
Yeah, yeah. And the Talmud does pick up a lot of these things, so I think it's kind of built into some of the Jewish DNA, because the Talmud talks a lot about this kind of, the details.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail.
Because when
in
it comes
there.
back, right, when the 3rd temple is built,
You have to know what to do.
you gotta know in detail what to do, so we don't make the mistake they did. Whatever that was, right?
Busy talking about the ultimate and not referring. It's an interesting thing. These scholars are more concerned some about the sacrifices in the church temple.
Right.
Rather than the state as it exists now and what they can do to sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
Take the tunnel tour when you're in Jerusalem, you'll see.
Or in Gaza.
About that.
Yes. All right, so we're, yeah.
The eighth day.
Well, because it's the day after the seventh day of the ordination.
Before the night.
It's the separation between the holy times and secular time, the
Right.
Shabbat and the work week.
Well, it's also between setting up the altar, okay, day 8 is really day 1 of the altar. Now we're set up, we're going. So it is a transition point, which is why I think what happens next is so important. By the way, did you ever watch The Simpsons talking about all the barbecue going on? Oh.
Tell us, yeah.
Oh, so there's one point he's in church and he's falling asleep and wait, his wife says, you can't fall asleep during the sermon, you know, that's terrible, that's horrible, it's gonna make God angry. And he says, oh, the world's not gonna end because I go to sleep. So he goes to sleep and the world ends. And he wakes up and he goes out and there's all this fire and lava and stuff, you know, Homer, all this fire and lava and stuff. And he says, ooh, barbecue. Anyway,
That sounds like.
yes. Are we only gonna do 4 verses today?
That's this group, what can we say?
I lived for a while down the street from an Oscar Mayer.
Oh.
That's why you moved,
They
yeah.
would burn- This is before pollution. They would burn.
Mr. Pollution, you made-
It's reek. Yeah, used to it, like, people would come to visit. How do you stand?
What?
All
All right, somebody, verse 5?
Moving on,
Sure. All right,
you want me to read it?
sure, go ahead.
Where do you want me to start?
5.
5, they brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moshe had commanded, and the whole community came forward and stood before the Lord. Moshe said, this is what the Lord has commanded that you do, that the presence of the Lord may appear to you. Then Moshe said to Aaron, come forward to the altar and sacrifice your purification offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them as the Lord has commanded.
So you kind of picture this as a series of like concentric circles, right? There's the altar, there's the priesthood, there's Israel, they're the peoples of the world, right? Just like there's Jerusalem, the land of Israel, you know, the world, right? So we've done the altar, now it's the priests and then the people. And then the Israelite people, other people just aren't on the map here, right? They don't count.
Are converts allowed?
Presumably, yes, well, they kind of did, yeah, if you joined the Israelite people in one way or the other. If you're a woman from another group and you married an Israelite, I think you would be part of the community. Yeah.
Would they be asking questions on like if other people outside of the Jews were coming in to get sacrifices, are they gonna ask them for identification?
Show your visa, yeah. I mean, this seems to me to be a problem in the tabernacle. I wasn't gonna go there, but it's a good question. So, because we know there was a Asaf Suf, right? The rabble or whatever you call it.
Arab Rav.
Arab Rav, yeah, it's what we used to call rabbinic students, right?
Yeah.
But you know, what if they approach? I mean, are they converts? Well, maybe, maybe not. Who knows? How do you know? I don't think it makes that much of a difference because they're not approaching the altar. Nobody's approaching the altar. I mean, outside the priesthood. So if they bring an offering, so what? As long as they bring a, you know, a lamb that's not blemished, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure that would make a difference.
But I mean, there's a hierarchy, obviously.
Oh,
But
yes.
there's also, in Leviticus, you see the democratization of holiness. At the same time, I mean, here you have the reference to the whole community came forward and stood before the Lord.
Right.
So there, there's a little bit of an irony here. You get an emphasis on hierarchy, but, you should be holy, for I am the Lord your God is holy.
Right.
And, love thy neighbor and so on. As you go along, you get more of a leveling, even though it is about priesthood.
Well, you've got the Goy Kadosh, right? The Israelite people are a holy people compared to everybody else. That's different than the altar and who can approach the altar, and that has to be the priests. And later on, it was only the high priest on Yom Kippur could go inside and see the actual Aron, right? I mean, it's very hierarchical, but the people can only go so far. Right.
It's an interesting question when they wrote this. Okay. There had to be some priests involved in actually, I mean, they say that the priests wrote this book.
Right.
The priestly interpretation.
Right.
Because who else knew what was going on inside?
Right.
This had to be somehow transmitted to whoever was the editor. I'm sorry to bring up these things, but I guess because it occurs to me that when you're putting the whole thing together.
Right, well, this is clear, yeah, this is the priestly, I mean, the last several books, chapters. This is the priest's point of view. This is how we, the priests, do it. And they're laying out the rules. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What exactly would the people have expected when Moshe says you will see kavod Hashem? What would it be kavod?
My hunch is, and again, I wasn't there, but my hunch is when this whole thing starts and the first offering, the burnt offering, all the smoke and whatever goes up, that the people seeing that have what I want to say, a spiritual experience.
Oh.
Yeah. Look at the smoke, it's rising up. In our midst, the Lord is with us, Yeah, I think that's what's going
The
on.
whole theme is that, we're now in the presence of God. And
Right. Once you have the holy altar activated, that's in your midst. That's not Sinai, that's not somewhere, that's right in the midst of the community.
At Sinai, people were afraid of God's presence. You couldn't see his face to face. Now, this is a tremendous transformation. I mean, that's the whole last 25 chapters. We're talking about building Mishkan, being God's partner, bring God presence right there rather than transcendent, imminent.
Yeah, and that could be a transition to what happens to Nadav and Avihu, because this is Sinai in the middle of us. And this is God's presence, and boy, you have to be careful to approach it in the right way at the right time. Otherwise, it's like sticking your finger in an electric socket, right?
And it's the cheap role.
Right.
Like the traffic count.
Well, when we get to the Nadav and Abihu, I mean, there was controlled fire and there was uncontrolled fire.
Right.
And they created uncontrolled fire.
Right, well, maybe we should turn to that now.
Well, it's the beginning of chapter 10. Beginning of chapter 10.
Chapter 10, yeah. Yeah, so the rest of this first part is how they brought the thing, then you bring the blood, and you sprinkle the blood, you do this, and you do that.
Basically repeating.
It's all
what we already
the
talked about.
techniques of, yeah. Okay, so chapter 10. Now Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and they offered before the Lord alien fire, which he had not enjoined upon them. It's a little bit needs unpacking here, huh?
The he being God. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the English translation.
Yeah, there's no cap, yeah. I mean, you could ask, who, was it God, was it Moses, was it Aaron? Who was the he? Forget the capital letter, that's a translation interpretation. The Hebrew says, which,
It translates, yeah, I don't know. But-
well, no, it says, lo tziva otam.
Command.
So he did not command, but it's which he? God?
It doesn't even have a
Aaron?
he in here. It just says it wasn't commanded.
Well, but-
Right, but it's in the active voice,
Yeah.
not tzuva, they weren't commanded.
Yeah, low
It was commanded to it is commanded to them or something. It doesn't say whether it's God, it's Aaron, it's Moses. So the capital he making it God is a,
Our.
it's an interpretation.
It's their interpretation.
Well, so their interpretation.
Whoever the day was.
Okay. What is alien fire?
I don't know. Is there any other way to translate Zara? Other than
Strange, unauthorized.
It's just something that was not so much unauthorized, but not specified, or they didn't follow the recipe.
Yeah, they didn't do the,
Push with it, you know, for a little bit here and a little bit there. They would do it following the recipe.
It was spontaneous, they were doing something spontaneous, which is not the role of the priest. The priest is routine, you know,
Right.
continuity, over and over.
there's multiple problems with this. One is they weren't the high priest, so they shouldn't have been doing it. Two is they didn't do the other three offerings before the meal offering.
I'm not sure that's important, because those were done,
Yeah, but it should be done again before you do this again.
maybe, but unauthorized, at least to me, makes a certain amount of sense,
Is
right?
incense all mentioned elsewhere?
Uh-huh.
They did this incense thing, and I don't see anyone else.
Yeah, and that's not mentioned either, so I wondered about,
Pagan or, you know, another
right.
idolatry sort of thing.
I mean, incense is part of the ritual later on, but here they're doing it now, in this way, at this time.
Also, there's an incense offering and it's inside, and that's Aaron's business, not theirs.
So I think they did something unauthorized, or what did you say, spontaneous or individual? I think the lesson here, which should be more spelled out but isn't, is that all this technique about how do, I mean, the priests at the end of the day are human beings, right? Right, well, I mean, maybe not in their own eyes, but yeah, but the priests are human. How do human beings manage to get on the altar? What's the greatest source of ritual impurity?
Death.
Going on the altar. Oh, well, yeah, if you're dying.
Death?
Going on the altar, which is not, no one and nothing is.
Out in the world, what's the, what tumba, blood, dead bodies, right? What is the priest throwing all over the altar? Blood and dead bodies. Right? How can a human being do that and not offend God? Well, only the priest can do that, because the priest is this special kind of person, right?
It gets this.
What if you bring blood and dead bodies and throw them on the altar, and you're doing it out of time, out of place, out of person, right?
Out of luck.
You're out of luck. Well, yeah.
Sons of the priests.
Right, they're not commoners. They are part of the priestly.
Really, it's left to our imagination or I shouldn't use the word imagination, our intellectual ability to think why these two were chosen. And it's a very quick action. We don't discuss why. We just said they did it and poof, they disappeared. Like Puff the Magic Dragon,
See.
and they pointed out as high people, I hate to be political, but in other words, anybody,
Yeah, she doesn't hate it.
some priest is a president, okay? Blackies, all the cabinet and all those people are not allowed to do things that the priest can do, or maybe I should say the high priest, the Supreme Court justice, that would maybe.
Whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but he,
Because they can't do it, and we're giving the example of all the, the judges, the Supreme Court judges, but not the Supreme Court, the high, what's his name?
No, part of my problem here with the story of Nadav and Avihu is that they brought this stuff, they were zapped, and we get this very obscure explanation. And I think there's a very clear explanation, but it's somehow it. Yeah, they disobeyed the rules, and look, if you, I mean,
These are all the people.
oh, yeah. And even though you're, right, the son of a priest, and even though you have the status, and even though you've been consecrated, you gotta follow the rules because the mechanics of being, of Kedusha will get you anyway if you don't do it the right way.
you know, it's helpful if you compare priest with prophet. Take Moses, I mean, Moses and the prophet can act spontaneously. Moses comes down with the tablets, the first tablets, and throws them down, shatters the tablets. It's very spontaneous. You know, it's, you know, who would think that that would be authorized?
Right.
But here, the priest is not the prophet. It shows you the distinction between the priest and the
Oh, right.
prophet. And Nadav and Avihu are priests, they're not prophets.
Right, they're part of the hierarchy. I mean, yeah.
But what Ivan is saying actually is telling us, okay, Moses did it. That was wrong, God forgave him. This time, they should know better and not do it, not take things into their own hands.
No, I think there's a distinction between Moses and, there's a distinction. They're priests, and Moses isn't a priest.
Because what the priest is doing is acting at the nexus between the divine and us. Yeah, so to speak.
Well, and
So if you're at the nexus, it's a dangerous place to be. If you're not at the nexus and you throw down the tablets, that's pretty shocking and et cetera, but it's not literally the nexus.
right. I think you're point on, right? Yeah, Moses did something bad, he lost his temper, blah, 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 fine. The altar is really the connection between heaven and earth, and there you really have to be careful. And if you go to the altar in the wrong way and you pollute the altar, it's got consequences. It's the altar.
Right.
Was Aaron made priest before the Ten Commandments or after?
Good question. I want to say before.
And why he's made, he
That's
is
true.
brother of Moses is Levi. So Moses appoints Aaron as the high priest.
Right.
Well, he was the older son.
Who?
Aaron was the older son. Of course, he was gonna be the priest. Not,
Well, that's not of course, but
I mean, the hierarchy says he should have been.
yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, Ivan, real quick though,
Since we have
Moses
6
didn't get to
seconds.
die in Israel because he acted spontaneously, hit a rock,
Yeah.
got the water. So it's not always so, I think, is clear that a prophet can be one way and a priest has to be the other. There's a little bit of overlap with God, you know, in that regard. So I'm not sure where to go with that, but I don't think it's always 100%. And a second point, I'm wondering, if we're supposed to learn that unlike Pharaoh and other places, we don't have that the sons of Aaron aren't this special thing, that we don't have this lineage of.
We do.
but we do.
Yeah, well, but as I'm saying, it's not, it doesn't override God's interest here. I mean,
That's fair enough, but to be a priest, you have to be in the line of Aaron.
And a prophet once in a generation, you know, speaks truth to power. There's no doubt. But the priest is forever, the rules, the continuity, the day-to-day repetition. It's a totally different modus operandi, right? Totally. And so we have to learn here what the difference is and what it takes to survive. And the priests are in charge of that. Really.
Yeah, but I think this is also about, what does it take for the priests to survive? Because they're the ones going to the altar every single day and putting their lives at risk, so to speak, right? And if the priest does something wrong, that's what we learn right here. If the priests deviate, they put themselves into danger.
His siblings probably, we need to agree on one persuaded the other.
Right.
Like,
Right. And that's gonna get you into trouble. And that's the,
cost you life.
The beginning.
What about on Yom Kippur?
you know, what,
Many of the priests,
Pulled out by the
bells
rope.
and, and they would get yanked out.
right, and the prophets keep saying, look, this priesthood is no longer, of course, we lost the temple, right? Right. So, and I don't know if the names Nadav and Avihu are significant or not. Well, Nadav is a free will offering.
Yeah.
He's my father. I can, I'm a priest. I can do what I want. So, and Nadav, we can bring an offering on our free will. We don't have to follow the rule book. What do you call it? The user's manual, right?
I wonder how old they were, because I think of teenagers of today who might say, ooh, let's try this, and then they get in trouble.
They were teenagers. They had to be at least 20.
Oh, okay, close.
So you don't grow a frontal cortex, so you're what, 23 or something?
Exactly.
Or whatever it is.
I mean, I don't know, but I think the point here is, yeah, they're priests, yeah, they're proper priests, but you're approaching the altar and you've got to really be careful how you do that and follow the user's manual. And this is not God's punishment necessarily, but this is what happens. Hey, can you imagine if the whole priesthood had been wiped out? God says, oh, I gotta start all over again.
I was thinking that might be the reason why Moshe didn't get zapped earlier. Was because who was gonna carry on if he didn't use
Right.
Moshe? He was preparing Moshe for 100 years.
Right. He's not gonna lose them now.
Yeah, can't afford to lose them.
Right.
It is interesting that he lasted so long, had the energy.
Yeah, and he did something much worse, I thought, to throw the tablets down and crash them. I mean, I can't think of anything worse than, God wrote the tablets, and he came down and he threw it on the ground and broke it, and God did not write it again, Moses.
There's a midrash that I'm writing about that. Because,
Go for it.
because Moshe already knew what was going on down below because God told him. I think what was left out of the book was that God told him to throw down the tablets to make a big deal out of it.
Well, I mean, one of the things we discussed a few weeks ago is the first tablets are all God's work, right? And that's
It's too
that
much.
we don't deserve, so to speak, but maybe we do deserve a set of tablets that are a project together.
With God, yeah.
This whole thing is that if we had not been afraid at Sinai, if all the people had viewed God at Sinai, would have gotten the Torah then, probably God wouldn't have said, oh boy, now I need something on earth, I need a Mishkan, I need all these rules. So in a way, it's a derivative, everything we do now down to the mitzvot are a derivative away from if we had instantaneous access to Torah.
If all of us, you're right.
Right.
Also for you. That we didn't do things. In some books, we would, the myths and all from all the other civilizations, everyone would have obeyed or everybody would not have obeyed. We have people doing human actions, and that's the whole beauty of the Bible. These are human beings who have their own ideas. And it's a development of the people in other civilization.
So then the other thing I'd want to ask in light of all of this is, and you, you know, from the anthropology background, it's clear that one of the reasons we're offering sacrifices at all at the time is that's what people were doing in the ancient Near East and many other places. But one of the things we often talk about is what's different about what we're doing than they're doing. But one could also ask maybe the question, what's similar other than just the fact that we're offering things? Were other cultures similarly worried about how to do it and who is entitled to do it?
Probably.
And
Because, I mean, what we do know anthropologically where those
And only
things
using
exist,
kosher pure
they
animal.
are these kind of concerns.
and you know, one of the, you know, there's often a debate, you know, was there an Exodus, wasn't there an Exodus, who was in it, who wasn't in it? And one of the things that's often ironically brought in favor of there certainly was, at least among the Levites, is the similarities to things in Egypt.
In Egypt, right.
How would they have, if they weren't there at all, how would they have remotely known?
Right. Right.
It's a huge debate throughout Jewish history, you know, with the rabbis and the sages as to
Rabbis and sages are the same thing.
It depends. Rabbi you're talking about.
that sacrifices were meant to be phased out. We had to evolve to a certain point so that prayer could take the place of sacrifice.
My Dr. Father used to say the destruction of the temple was one of the best things that happened to Judaism, because no sacrificial religion has survived. And we needed to make that transition.
Time, it says everyone else was doing sacrifices, and that's the only way they knew.
Right.
What is an
So-
example of other sacrificial religions?
Well, in the ancient world, in Greco-Roman world, I mean, they were all sacrificial. Right. I mean, Jews were not particularly.
Can I interrupt? Is anybody the owner of the Winnebago in the parking lot?
It was there,
Okay, so no one in this room, nobody knows who's, okay, thank you.
It was camping out there.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's on the way on the far side. Before we end, I wanted to look at what the reaction to the death of Nadav and Abihu.
Wait, going back to sacrifices for a second.
Who did invite you?
I don't know. Sacrifices started way back at Cain and Abel. There has to be something in human nature.
Right.
To think that they had to do sacrifices.
Yeah.
Well, you know, coming, how do you get close to God?
Yeah. And if you're a farmer, I mean, what are your, what?
But what was his name? Adam and Eve didn't do sacrifices. It started with the second generation.
Yeah. So let's go back. We're at what, 11? 3. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord meant when he said that, though through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. What does that mean?
I never understood.
No, many different teachings on Aaron not saying anything, and people left.
I'm not sure that's the best translation either. I read it, it's the dome. So I'm reading that as Aaron was dumbfounded. It's not that he didn't grieve, he was just, in shock, huh? Well, certainly traumatized, but he's just struck dumb. Oh, I think what this very obscure passage is saying, to those near to me, I show myself holy. Well, who are near to God? The priests who approach the altar. It's through them that my holiness happens. right? Through the priests who actually go to the altar and don't die. That's where my holiness happens, right? And that's where my glory comes to the people. And therefore, if the priesthood messes up, it's my holiness that's attacked. But what does Kedusha mean, by the way? I mean, holy, but what's? What makes something holy as opposed to
Separate, elevated.
different, elevated,
Distinguishing boundaries.
huh?
Distinguishing.
Distinguished,
Boundaries.
right,
Real.
right.
Either be distinguished or extinguished.
I
Here you are.
like that.
What was that?
But then, this, which is what we say is Melech HaMalchim, he is the supreme king.
Right,
And we're making him only,
I see.
almost a person.
And that's part of the reason this part is called Shemini, because it distinguishes between holy time and secular time.
and holy place and secular place and holy people and non-holy people. Well, holy, really holy people and not so holy people.
But here it's time, holy time.
Right, also.
Shabbat and the work week.
Right. And later on, we'll see there's holy of holies, right? There gradations or their levels within holiness, right? And if you think of the temple when it was built, remember that? So you have the holy of
I
holies.
wasn't there, were you?
You have
Oh, I
the,
was there at the second one, yeah.
you have the tabernacle.
Oh, there.
You have the tabernacle, you have the inner court, you have the outer court. And certain people the men can go here, the men and women can go here, only the men can go here, only the priests can go here, only the high priest can go
Same
here.
thing today.
So, yeah, and I think you're right, we either keep the distinction or we get extinguished, I like it.
Being befuddled or dumbfounded. It might have, I think the people might have been anticipating we are going to observe the holy God. Holy God's going to be there. And what God ended up saying was, my holiness is going to be flowing through you. You become holy. Aaron, you're going to be holy, and in turn, you're going to make the people holy. And that might be this whole transformational idea that now, it isn't just that we're following a holy God, we are holy people. And that's a befuddling thing. What does it mean to be holy people? And that's what we learn, I guess. over
That
time.
also makes them sort of snobs, in other words. People of Israel are better than other people because they have the priest and the God.
We don't know if that's the only path to holiness, right?
No, but it's accused of.
Yeah, but every religion says that.
But
about
that's, yeah,
So in this parsha, we have foods that are permitted.
yeah, that's it. Right.
So that's another key distinction
Difference.
in Shemini comes out.
So if you want to stretch the analogy, so you have priests, you have Levites, you have male Israelites, you have Israelites. If you don't follow the rules of the Israelites, you eat ham sandwiches on Yom Kippur or whatever, then you're outside of Israel. Then you're just part of the world. Right?
Leviticus is considered the central book, chiasma, right?
Right.
It's the most important book. And with the Orthodox, they start their kids out with Leviticus,
Right.
Genesis.
And maybe the other way to look at this, if Christianity deals a lot with abstracts, with faith, with belief, with, broad ideas. The Jewish tradition is, let's start at the very basic level with the details, right? That's what the Talmud is all about, very basic details, and let's work up. Right? And so Leviticus it's the details. It's not, make a sacrifice to the Lord. It's do it in a very specific way to maintain the distinctiveness of the holiness.
I can't decide how I want to interpret the killing of the sons through fire, because here we have an altar in which humans are creating fire, offering that up.
Well, not humans, priests.
The priest, well, hopefully they're human.
Well,
Right, so the priest, and here God in
So they're
turn,
alien, that was the problem.
you know, I don't wanna see the sons almost as the God's sacrifice in a way, or our sacrifice. So I don't wanna see that, so why didn't God just make them it just seems odd that the fire, if there's anything to the fire being used in two different ways. We saw a very creative God bring down a wide range of plagues upon the Egyptians, so, you know, the way, so God has other tricks in his bag besides just fire.
I think there are some
swallowing
other
the
tricks though, Bill, because if you read further, there are instructions to remove the bodies.
Right.
So what was burned? And evidently not the bodies.
Carry them out by the token. No, they don't even touch the
Right, they don't
bodies.
touch them because they've been rendered holy apparently, right?
Exactly. So if you think about the fire, maybe this is a good place to end. So fire starts with really concrete stuff like wood or coal or something like that. There's flame and then there's smoke that goes up to heaven. So fire is really the connection, right, between heaven and earth. And that's, I think, and that was true for the ancient world, was certainly true for the Greeks, certainly true for Aristotle. Yeah.
Zeus withholds the fire, doesn't want to share the fire. That's the God that he.
Right, because once people have fire, we have access to the divine.
Right. And Prometheus fulfilled.
The English word, ash, would that come from me?
From, what is the American word ash
The
come?
English word ash,
Yeah.
is that
Fire.
from the Hebrew ash?
Probably not.
I'm gonna say probably not. I don't know. I'd have to go run to my Oxford English dictionary.
I mean, English is full of words that come from other languages, but probably not.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
What about it?
No.
Well,
Yeah, there you go.
because
To the end.
Get to the end, we got.
When I can say, it's probably when Nadav and Avihu make ashes of themselves. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom.